Hello everyone, Josh MC2000 here, and today I've got another video for you all. Today we're going to be covering Horus Heresy Legion on Audio Anarchy. Hey, hello, Editing Josh here. Don't mind the fact that I'm not looking at the camera as much. I apologise. I put my notes in a really stupid place for this video. I hope you guys still enjoy the video, and I apologise about that. Next video, I will try and put my notes in a more sensible place where I can actually look at the camera. Legion is the second book by Dan Abnett that I've read, the first of which being False Gods, the second book in the Heresy. Despite most 40k fans recommending that you start with Xenos, a book in Abnett's Eisenhorn trilogy, I first found Dan's work through the Heresy. Most 40k fans tend to start with his 40k works, because if you look at a list of any suggestions for first 40k books to read, Abnett's Xenos shows up in pretty much nearly all of them. I personally started with Swords of Calth by Graham McNeill. What can I say? I found the prospect of large-scale warfare more interesting than the Inquisition. It also helped that my first exposure to Warhammer was Imperium, which started with Necrons and Ultramarines, which are pretty much the two factions in Swords of Calth. So, after reading False Gods, I was looking forward to Legion, and for the most part, I've enjoyed pretty much every single one of the Heresy books that I've read. The previous one, Descent of Angels, is actually one of my favourites. I've started writing up some 40k lists for Dark Angels because of it, and let's just say, after picking up a lovely second-hand Dark Angels Dreadnought, I don't need much convincing to give the first Legion a try on the tabletop. Anyway, enough about the background of the series as a whole, let's talk about the book in particular. Be aware, I will be giving a rundown of the plot, so this video will contain spoilers for Legion, and possibly some other Heresy books. You have been warned. Legion is about the Alpha Legion, one of the legions that turned traitor during the Heresy, and it is also the story of how the youngest Legion of Astartes turn on the Imperium and their brothers in arms. The first big change about this book is the focus. It focuses a lot less on the marine characters of the Alpha Legion. They're pretty much only viewed from a distance for the majority of the first part of the book. Unlike previous titles like Flight of the Eisenstein, where pretty much primarily all the main characters in the things was Astartes officers, like Garo and Loken. Instead of this, the book puts a large focus on the 30k equivalent of the Imperial Guard. The legions in question being the Geno Chiliad and the Lucifer Blacks. They also share a large amount of screen time with a Cabal agent by the name of John Grammaticus. The Lucifers actually spent a vast amount of their screen time hunting down John after they realised there's a spy in their midst. If you can't tell at this point, the book is heavily focused on espionage. Those that know the rules for Alpha Legion for both 40k and the Heresy won't be surprised by this, and with Abnett's pedigree of writing the Inquisition, you'd expect this book to be a home run. But despite my love for everything James Bond and Jason Bourne, I found the opening of this book somewhat slow for my taste, and don't get me wrong, it's not bad, it just takes a bit for all the pieces to line up and for it to get into gear. And I particularly like the part in the book where John and Peto, an officer called a Het in the Chiliad, starts working with the Alpha Legion, and we start getting a little bit more details on what the Cabal actually want from the Alpha Legion, and why they need this inside man in contact with the Legion. It's also the reason they're at the planet of Nerf to begin with, and they managed to pull this off while keeping the Alpha Legion pretty much shrouded in mystery. Like, it's not like Horus Rising where you learn a lot about the Legion. The Alpha Legion is still pretty much an enigma, with the exception of a few things we'll talk about later. As I've already said, the Legion at this point becomes more active in the plot. But what is this Cabal I keep talking about, I hear you ask? The Cabal is an organisation made up of a number of Xenos or alien species Grammaticus's boss being an Eldar Autarch by the name of Slaudar, actually. We learn they have been manipulating the Legion for pretty much centuries at this point, guiding them into a position where they can help affect the outcome they want from the Heresy, with the goal of saving the galaxy from the primordial annihilator, or better known to me and you as Chaos. It is also the reason they're on the planet Nerf to begin with, as I mentioned earlier, with the Cabal hoping to demonstrate the dangers of Chaos because the locals have this WMD, this weapon of mass destruction, that literally they use to destroy the entire planet in one last act of defiance. Meaning the Guard barely get away, well, not the Guard, the 30k equivalent. They get away by the skin of their teeth. They lose a lot of their armoured units, and, like, it's messy, and the general character in it, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he ends up getting some flack, and, like, he the tech priest attached to him turns around and says, yeah, don't expect any help from Mars in the future. He literally sods off back to Mars. He's like, yeah, I ain't working with you again. Which, to be honest, given the fact that it's kind of his fault they lost so many things because he laughed at the warning of the Alpha Legion, guy's a bit of a dumbass. Anyway. But after this, the main big plot event that happens is the Legion meets with the Cabal on a world of John's choosing. Yes, I said 2 Primarchs, Alfarius and Omegon. They're faced with a choice here. Join Horus and help the Heresy succeed to destroy Chaos at the cost of humanity, or remain loyal to their father and let the galaxy slowly fall to the dark powers. This is the choice they're presented with. And the book ends with the Legion turning on its human allies. They pretty much execute the general I mentioned earlier, and it's unveiled to the audience that the Alpha Legion intend to side with Horus and do it with the ultimate goal of bringing about the Emperor's desire of destroying Chaos. So, by the end of the book, they are pretty much sided with Chaos. Although they're siding with Chaos to destroy Chaos. Like, you see where the concept should be, like, really cool here? Yeah. Please be aware, I've given you very much the broad strokes of the tale. The audiobook is roughly 8 hours long, and unlike other Heresy books, I listened to it over the period of about a month. Because the section at the start was quite disappointing after going through False Gods, and it genuinely meant I dragged my feet getting through Legion. On a more positive note, I'd say some of my favourite characters from the book were definitely Bronzy and Peto, and the characters surrounding them. It was actually quite sad to see their fates at the end of their tale, actually, and John became more interesting towards the back end of the book, when we had a bit more about the Cabal, and we kind of knew what his motives were. Although I will say his introduction was a bit jarring after spending several chapters with just the Chiliad. Although I should have expected it, because it is something that isn't uncommon for these books to change perspective between a number of characters. Although, in stuff like False Gods, it wasn't our first time meeting those characters when they get their first chapter from their point of view. Normally we'd have met them in other chapters. But here we just kind of get dropped into a chapter with John, and it just kind of feels a bit out of nowhere. But also, this is entirely possible. This could just be a me thing. Also, I found the Alpha Legion less interesting than legions prior to them in the series, personally. I know they're trying to keep them all mysterious and, like, you know, you don't know everything about them, but for me, that kind of worked against them, because, like, as much as I disliked the Emperor's Children for their arrogance, I still found them engaging, because, like, the whole thing with them, like, being this legion that expires for perfection, and, like, the whole thing with them being... the whole thing with them being this legion that desires perfection above all else, and also just succumb to the most. I'm gonna put it out there. I think Slaanesh is honestly the worst Chaos God after reading Fulgrim, because some of the stuff she causes the Emperor's children to do are pretty fucked up. And yeah, it's like, yeah, gotta be honest, Zeech might get bored and cause you to grow a random tentacle, but that's preferable to the fates of some of the people in Fulgrim, honestly. Just saying. Yeah, as I said, I don't think the Alpha Legion didn't quite hook me in the same way some of the other legions did. And especially not, I keep bringing up False Gods here, but False God, it's because the first 3 books in this series are really good. Like, first 4 as well, Flight of the Eisenstein. The first 4 books are really good, and the work on the Lunar Wolves and their kind of slow turn to heresy is actually really good. And like the fact that you have it from the point of view of Loken, who's like a loyalist, and you're seeing him just slowly watch his legion change around him and fall apart around his ears, and he's just powerless to stop it. It's really good, and Abnett's work on False Gods was really good, and I just feel like Alpha Legion got the short end of the stick, because they're the legion that you're supposed to know the least about, and you can't give everyone all the answers because it ruins the mystique of the Alpha Legion. But the problem when you're writing the Alpha Legion is like you can't ruin their mystique, right? And as a consequence, it means you have to keep them at arm's length when writing them. You can't like really go in depth on the Alpha Legion, you know, not like the way you could with the Lunar Wolves and then later the Sons of Horus, because, you know, we're not supposed to know much about the Alpha Legion, so it kind of ruins it if you start giving us all this really interesting, really rich information on them. Like, the whole thing with the Mournival about Horus's lieutenants and his advisors having this initiation that is kind of seen as old hat and is actually spooks their new member when like they're joining it. It's like, this is a little bit like religion. This is a little bit like the stuff the Imperial Truth says we don't do, right? You know, we're not making any kind of pact or anything here, are we? This is just between us. Like, you know, and it's got that thing that, like, you know, that despite the Imperial Truth, they still hold some old traditions. And it's like, I'm sure it'll be like, I've heard Thousand Sons is quite good as well. Because of the stuff it does with the Thousand Sons and how it makes them more believable. But I'm going to be honest, I think the problem for me with Legion is the fact that you're dealing with an Astartes chapter, or Legion rather at this point, that you, by their very nature of what they are, you can't know much about them. Like, so it means you are forced into... There's a very particular way you have to write them, basically, in order for it to work. Anyway, that aside, there's one final thing I want to touch on with the Alpha Legion, which is the whole I am Alpharius thing. Now, I'm going to be honest, it got incredibly grating after a while, and I understand the 2 Primarchs hiding their ranks because it's to do with the whole Mystique thing, but I've never been one for the whole I am Batman, I am Groot kind of gag, and as a consequence, this whole I'm Alpharius thing was kind of doomed for me from the start. And it turned into something that should have been an interesting part of the Legion for me, and it took it and turned it into something that just had me eye-rolling. Like, but this is probably a minor one compared to like some of the other things I brought up about this book, so that your mileage is probably going to vary on that one. I'm going to be honest, that one's probably just me being like really nitpicky and just being really tired of that kind of gag. Like, the idea of the Primarchs hiding in their ranks, though, and you not knowing who is actually the Primarch is actually a pretty neat idea, though. And I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that improved upon in later books, because This is the first book in the series that deals with the Alpha Legion. They show up briefly in Galaxy in Flames because they're one of the ones involved at Isfahan. But, you know, there were set dressing in Isfahan, basically. They weren't one of the guys that were focused on, so, you know, very much like the Raven Guard, just there to make up their numbers. But yeah, I honestly hope that they can take some of the ideas in this book and expand upon them over the course of the Heresy, because the whole idea of the two Primarchs hiding within their ranks and the Legion being kind of like the MI5, MI6, kind of like espionage side of the Imperium is quite interesting, you know, because one of the things that really struck me about them was the idea that they are willing to do some pretty bad things to get the job done. You know, they throw one of the Chiliad squads, the dancers, completely under the bus just for a distraction. Like, they're willing to throw the human soldiers away like that just to get into position to, like, end the fight. You know, they're a bit more... I can't remember the word Slaudar used to describe Alfarius, but Alfarius was, like, offended for, like, 2 seconds after he was described this way, and then he thought about it and is like, actually, yeah, I am. Like, you know, so you kind of get the idea that, like, Alfarius, like, he kind of is good at what he does, but I don't think he entirely likes it. Because as soon as it's pointed out to him, it kind of has 2 seconds where it's like, how dare you? And then he's like, oh, wait, actually, yeah. Anyway, as for the other books in the Heresy, that's pretty much all I got to say for Legion. Not my favourite of the series, although it had some cool ideas in there, had some neat characters. It's not a bad read, it's just not my favourite. Now, anyway, as for the other Heresy books, I do 100% intend to cover the first 4. As I've said, they are really good. And if you're just looking to dip your toe in the water into, like, the Heresy books, just go with the first 3. The initial trilogy about the Lunar Wolves. The Horus Rising, False Gods, Galaxy in Flames. Just try them, and if you like it, then go for Flight of the Eisenstein, and go from there. I mean, to be honest, I'm not the boss of you. You can go straight to, like, the end one if you want, and then just go read Siege of Terror. Like, you know, it's up to you. There's loads of 40k books. They all have different things for different folks. Now, as I said, I intend to cover the first 4, if nothing else, but we'll see. Before that, though, I do plan to cover For the Emperor, which is the first Caiaphas Cain book. And at the time of writing, I'm about 8 chapters in, and I'm already starting to work on the script. Yeah, this video has been scripted, a little bit more so than my normal videos. I thought the last Audio Anarchy that I did about more lockdown was perhaps a little bit too jumbled. I mean, to be honest, I went a little bit off script towards the back end because I thought of some other stuff to talk about with the Alpha Legion, but for the most part, this video, it's why you can see me, like, moving the mouse, because I'm moving down my script. But it's, yep, also, I've got the setup here with the cover art of the book in the back. My friend kind of recommended to me and says, hey, you've got a really great setup for doing this kind of stuff. Like, you should probably try and do this more. So, yeah, I've got myself this setup on the go. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and let me know how you felt about this video being a bit more scripted. If you enjoy it, I will try and implement it where it's appropriate across the rest of my channel. But for the time being, the next thing that I'm going to be covering is For the Emperor, the first Caiaphas Cain book, and I'm actually really looking forward to covering this one because I've really enjoyed it. Between now and then, I'd recommend you give For the Emperor a listen. It's essentially Blackadder, but in 40k. Anyway, guys, that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.